All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Monday, January 26th, 2015. And this is Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Monday. I know how much we love Mondays. It is 14 degrees and overcast here. There is a monster of a storm rolling into New York City from what I see. I had feet on the ground yesterday telling me that they are predicting anywhere between 2 and 3 feet with winds between 35 and 55 miles an hour starting this afternoon for some sort of historic storm in New York. That's crazy. I mean, if you've ever been in New York, 2 or 3 feet of snow would be absolutely insane. I saw someone in chat yesterday saying, well, good thing all the subways are underground. But what you don't realize is that in sections of New York, the subway actually comes above ground, and those tracks get totally coated in snow. So that snarls up all of the subway traffic. I mean, airlines will all be closed, I'm sure. And it should be a good time. If you give me 1 second, I subscribe to a local New York City internet page. I don't know. It's Pix 11, so that must be like one of their local TV stations. And they had a Blizzard 2015 blizzard warning. It looks insane, guys. It really does. Hold on, I'll go there. It's pix11.com/weather. It's not loading at the moment. I'm sure there's like every person in New York City on that page right now. But I mean, it looks insane. It really does. And maybe I can get the video to play. Let's see. Maybe it's on Facebook. Do, 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 do. And we're starting Monday morning off great. The videos are playing. Come on. We are not going to like start this right off the bat, are we? I guess we are. So never mind. You can go out there and take a look at it yourself. I have, hold on. I'm all twisted up in my headphone cable. All right, I'm all better now. Anyway, that's pretty nuts. Good thing we're not getting it. That's all I can say. I wasn't up for 2 or 3 feet of snow right at the moment. There's kind of, I don't know, we got a couple inches on the ground and it's pretty cold. But besides that, I think I'm all right. Oh, so where do we continue? Do we continue from where we left off on Friday, looking at Obama's precision medicine initiative? Where I ended on Friday was actually taking a look at the cost of all of this. You know, they're touting this to be like this great thing. My disturbing issue was this quote out of a story that came out of IO9 a few days ago. Quote, is a multidisciplinary approach to healthcare. It will involve physicians, geneticists, pharmaceutical developers, public policy people, venture capitalists, and regulators that we know we trust so much, like the FDA, all as a part of your healthcare program. You know, when you look at Obamacare and just the whole overarching reason that I at least thought was part of Obamacare was to justify working together with all of these corporate entities. You know, one of the other issues was getting rid of that pesky HIPAA Privacy Act that was enacted, and I was correct, in 2003. Now, HIPAA had been around actually since the days of Bill Clinton. I looked it up in Wiki the other day. But the privacy piece was in 2003, and that's when I was talking about money falling from the sky, because every healthcare establishment that we did business with had to upgrade. They had to do encryption and encrypt from end to end. There were all kinds of new laws where you had to sign off. The only people that really are allowed to get your health information, and that would be just for small periods of time, would be like insurance companies and different entities that are required to know your information for billing purposes. But we read a story a while back when the girls were on with me in regards to how much that entails, and it was pretty frightening, the number of people that have their hands in your private health information just from billing purposes. And that would include, like, the secretary at the local office and, many different entities within the health insurance establishment. I mean, obviously, they're not going to go blabbing necessarily about your particular health, nor would they care. But it's just disturbing that there are, and I thought we saw there were hundreds of thousands of people that actually touched your records. So, but Obama and we talked about this again last week after Sandy Hook happened and he put out his executive actions, one of the things that he had talked about was making medical records more available. Because right now you need to have some sort of legal recourse as a law enforcement official to be able to start poking through someone's health records. In regards to Sandy Hook and the New York SAFE Act, that had to do with your psychological records, things you've discussed with your doctor. Have you ever told your doctor that you're feeling depressed? Have you ever gotten Ambien because you can't fall asleep at night? I mean, there was a story not too long ago about the gentleman who moved from New York or New Jersey, and we talked about this too, and had told his doctor he was having trouble sleeping after his move. And law enforcement officials actually came and took his firearms because of that. So, I mean, there's definitely a big issue there. I mean, I definitely think that your records, I mean, it's always been patient-doctor privilege that you should have been able to talk to your doctor in confidence about your issues, not to have some government entity digging through them. Well, with the whole advent of the electronic health records now coming to a close and them making that a mandatory thing, up until this point, it's been that was recommended. Here was a deadline. Oops, we passed the deadline. Okay, you small mom and pop doctor's offices will give you an extension, but they're really pushing it now. Like I had mentioned last week, the hospitals have gotten into the game to be central repositories for all of the doctors that then are affiliated with certain hospitals, which, I mean, it's nice because it takes the onus off of the doctor. But on the flip side, it now puts a much larger entity, which, from what we've been seeing, many of these large hospitals are now in cahoots and getting funding from places like DARPA, from large pharmaceutical corporations. We saw Johns Hopkins University had that huge database of all the children's brain scans that they were using now for the Brain Project. And it's a pretty disturbing picture that's painted. Let me see, which story was it we were looking at on Friday? So we had kind of tied some of the electronic health records, some of the future of IBM's Watson, which was their cognitive computing platform that now has been tooled to cover different verticals, the very first of which is healthcare, to be able to help doctors make decisions about your healthcare. But we've taken a look at Watson, and IBM's founding CEO, Thomas J. Watson, having been the individual who was responsible for the systems that kept track of all the rail cars bringing in the Jews and gypsies and Poles and all the other individuals that were gassed in Germany. There's a picture of Watson and Hitler sitting together having a conversation. IBM always, this story that we found reprinted from the Village Voice from April of 2002. Village Voice is NYU's paper. NYU actually has their hands on a lot of the original Nazi documents. It had actually shown that IBM had always retained ownership of that punch card system and software that maintained all of the records for the train schedules and had done 24/7 maintenance. They had people stationed there. Here, actually, here's the quote. When Adolf Hitler came into power in 1933, most of the world saw a menace to humanity, but IBM saw Nazi Germany as a lucrative trading partner. Its president, Thomas J. Watson, engineered a strategic business alliance between IBM and the Reich, beginning the first days of Hitler's regime and continuing right through World War II. This alliance catapulted Nazi Germany to become IBM's most important customer outside of the U.S. IBM and the Nazis jointly designed and IBM exclusively produced technological solutions that enabled Hitler to accelerate and in many ways automate key aspects of his persecutions of Jews, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and others the Nazis considered enemies. So there you go. Actually, I want to drop you guys that photo. I could drop this link in chat here. That is of a Thomas J. Watson, founding CEO of IBM and Hitler. I was pretty taken aback by that. So this new cognitive computing system that they are going to launch firstly on healthcare and then I saw in the financial marketplace is also by IBM and it is called Watson. How convenient. And it's going to be keeping track of uh, our physical abnormalities, looking at databases, looking at treatment options, and referring treatment options to your doctor. Watson will be the central computing system to this precision healthcare. And this is where we're now going to get into precision healthcare. They're making it sound so great. Of course, it's going to be financed by our federal tax dollars, just like many other things. This brain project that we think is so great, we don't, but other people do because, oh, lo and behold, it's going to cure all disease and we're going to be able to live forever. But what you don't realize is that they are using tax dollars sprinkled all over, DARPA dollars, which are also black hole tax dollars sprinkled at all the universities, Google, Motorola, they're all a part of it. Microsoft is a part of it too, National Institutes of Health. It's pretty insane. And they really want to understand the brain because once you understand all the mysteries of the brain, it will be much easier to control. They've been discovering all kinds of things where, and we looked at some of this DARPA research a few months back, where they could use flashes of light. They could use tones. They were doing all kinds of research in the name of injured service personnel from the military, namely in that case was PTSD, and how to remove traumatic memories from the brain and then replace them. So don't think that that isn't in the backs of their minds or maybe even in the forefronts of their minds. I mean, once they conquer the brain, and Obama had even come out and said that this brain project that he was getting all behind 100% was going to be the motivator for our economy in the 21st century, as the Genome Project was, which was discovering all of the mysteries to our human genes, mapping them all, and then trying to discover which genes on and off caused and prevented diseases, as what the Genome Project was for the 20th century. That Genome Project has then opened up an entire new realm of things such as biotechnology, nanotechnology, the RNAi vaccines. They've also done the Genome Project on plants. Last I saw a few years ago, they were working on all the insects. And I mean, if you remember that story back from 3-4 years ago in the UK, where they had already found over 200 petri dishes with animal human hybrids in them, you know, there's not a pretty future being painted here. It's going to be the globe of Dr. Moreau, not just the Isle of Dr. Moreau. So we had started reading this story on Friday in regards to Watson. I just wanted to touch on a few other things. We had also looked at another phase of this, which was called Lucy. And it was pretty interesting because Lucy took place first and it was in Africa. Now, when we looked at all of the RNAi vaccines, the whole Ebola, frightening instance, they scared us again into submission. They got everybody to believe. And I mean, like I said, I think Ebola was real. I don't know, though, if it was bioengineered or if it was a natural occurrence coming from fruit bats, like they said. And, then there was a story that came on after that they had actually located the tree with the hole in it, that the infected fruit bats that started the whole pandemic of Ebola this last time, they found that tree. Well, did they cut it down? I don't know. They didn't say. But how funny. They found the tree with the fruit bats. How nice was that? But, this whole scare in this country, and remember we watched all that, just how stupid they were, like CDC bumbling around, bumping into each other. It reminded me of the comedy of errors that's been happening in Fukushima. Like, how could you have this whole company and that's all they do is focus on nuclear, all these engineers that focus on nuclear, and these dumb assholes had no idea now for almost 4 years what to do. Really? How is that even possible? No ideas? None? You're just going to let it melt? Pour into the ocean? It's easier just to dump seawater on it and let it flow back out again and pretend like nothing's happening. Same thing with the Ebola. Let's fly the infected people to the United States. Whoops. Let's not track all the people they were in contact with on the plane until a week later. Whoops. Let's hire a cleaning crew that isn't wearing hazmat to clean out the apartment building where I don't even remember what that dude's name was. The one that was down in Texas had stayed with his family. And it was just a mass comedy of errors. And to me, it seemed like they really were tempting fate and trying to get it to spread as far as it could. But a few interesting things came out of that. And one was, and we talked about this, that RNAi vaccine, and there were multiples. There were a bunch of pharmaceutical companies, many of whom were fledgling startups who had gone public shortly before the Ebola outbreak. We also found, digging into it, that a bunch of them received DARPA funding and Department of Homeland Security funding long before this, under the guise of the bioterror, Homeland Security preparedness. We also found out that RNAi vaccinations, especially, but some of these nanotech as well, were, ethically speaking, from a global perspective, not allowed to be used on humans unless there was an emergency, because they were so new and novel in the way that they worked. And, oh, we don't know what it's going to do to humans. So how convenient that we had a quote unquote emergency, just like during the swine flu and the squalene vaccine that was never FDA approved, but it was available in Europe. And once they declared an emergency, they were able to fast track it all. FDA gave a rubber stamp and they were able to inject it into our children. I mean, it's the same playbook over and over. So, yes, we now have human trials of the Ebola RNAi vaccine, ones that can go in and flip switches on and off in your DNA. I mean, what a great new science that, hey, as Obama said, is now going to lead the way to all of this precision medicine. To me, somebody couldn't even plan this as well. What are the chances that all of this has happened just step by step perfectly for this big precision medicine coordinated effort between, what did we say? It was between the physicians, the geneticists, the pharmaceutical developers, the public policy people, the venture capitalists, and the FDA. Wow. It just all fell into place so nicely within just a few months. I'm really amazed. So now we have IBM Watson, this cognitive computing entity that is rolled out by IBM for healthcare. And they have gotten their feet into Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital, MD Anderson, the New York Genome Center, and the Mayo Clinic. I was also reading the Cleveland Clinic. It says they are also continuing to expand their work on educating doctors in the Cleveland Clinic, and the Watson ecosystem partners such as WellTalk, GenieMD, Modernizing Medicine, and Pathway Genomics are pushing the possibilities of cognitive computing further into the healthcare market every day. And every week we engage, and this is a brief by IBM, we engage new partners and clients around tackling new diseases and healthcare issues. Yes, all of these new diseases that we're getting. You know, anyone who listened to April and Verstein last night had the treat of hearing Dr. Yolanda Lucier again yesterday. We've had her on. I think that actually is the third interview over probably the last 2.5 years we've had on UCY from Dr. Lucier. She is I don't even remember what her title is, but she's worked with all kinds of people. She was in psychiatric. She did genetic swabs of prisoners in jail who had never had any violent outbursts, but who were in jail for killing people, and wanted to discover what these reasons were, why these people who were never violent all of a sudden went violent. And she discovered something interesting. And I mean, she got really into detail last night, but one of the big issues was that there is an enzyme called the cytochrome P450, or the CYP450 enzyme, that when it's suppressed, that actually is the enzyme that helps you regulate medications in your body. And when it is suppressed, these people tend to have overreactions to the drug. A normal dosage for a normal person is going to be an overdosage for someone who has a suppression in these enzymes. And we had discovered, I had found a document in my own research that came out at the end of last year that had talked about glyphosate, which again, we always come back to Monsanto. Glyphosate, Roundup, aka Roundup, causes a suppression of the cytochrome P450 enzyme. So what does that mean? That means that the general public that are ingesting GMOs, and I mean, where you're going to find glyphosate would be in any of your high fructose corn syrup. And oh, how surprising that high fructose corn syrup is in the majority of all the foods we consume. So, any of these GMO foods that have the genetic modification, like the BT corn, for example, I believe, with the genetically spliced immunity to this glyphosate. So then they spray glyphosate all over the fields, not caring because they're immune to it. So when you spray glyphosate everywhere, it's going to save you from having to be accurate and spray around the fields, but it's also going to be much easier because you could just spew it all over the fields. Those plants will not die, but anything around it will. But you also get that anyone who eats that food, any animal that ingests that food, is going to be ingesting large amount of glyphosate. And don't forget that that glyphosate also gets into the water table. It's also going to get into our drinking water. I mean, they found glyphosate in breast milk, for God's sake. You know, I could go on forever about GMOs and Monsanto and Syngenta and all the things that they found. For as much is they tell you that this stuff is safe, it is not. And there is a growing body of evidence. And we're actually going to get into, for anyone who got a heads up on my dystopia news over the weekend, we're going to get into nanotechnology in our food. And what I've been saying for a long time, and I know I've said it so many times, so I figured I'd find some proof to back it up because I never had documents to refer to while I was telling you about it, but it was stuff that I had read in the past. Nanotechnology has been in our food for a long, long time. So anyone who's ever ended up with these weird autoimmune diseases and the digestive problems and all these other freaky immune issues that we have all been experiencing as a group over the last 10 to 15 years, I think is very closely related to all of this stuff. You know, and don't think that these genetically modified food companies, seed companies, don't have anything to do with it, because they absolutely do. It's a big ecosystem. So when we look at this precision healthcare, and now they're going to be able to get in and manipulate our genes like they've been doing to the corn, like they've been doing to the soybeans, like they've been doing to all these other things. And we even proved that back a few months ago. We pulled the 2014 forward-looking statement from Monsanto and took a look at all of the things that they were planning on doing in research for 2014, which included RNAi technology on plants. So how interesting that when the Ebola quote unquote outbreak came around, they had all these drugs ready to roll in the pipeline that had not been approved because it was not ethical to be used against humans, to be able to try on humans, to experiment on humans. That was the one barrier to them. They were only allowed to try them in monkeys. But once they declared the state of emergency, because, oh my God, there's Ebola everywhere coming out of bloody noses, they then used that as their justification to send troops into Africa, if you remember, to get it under control. And I don't have any friends, thank God, that had to go there. I had one friend that actually thought he was going to have to go there, but they sent him the other direction, which I hope he's okay. But I will guarantee you, and we all know, that the armed services, once you enlist in there, they can try anything they want on you. All of my friends that went to the Gulf War, 1991, 92, all had to get the anthrax vaccine with squalene in it. And all of them they've either never been able to have children, they've had that chronic fatigue syndrome, they've had autoimmune diseases. I mean, there definitely are some issues. And when you start looking at really what squalene is, it's an adjuvant, something that irritates the immune system, just like in the old days when they used aluminum. My cat Oliver, who passed away quite a number of years ago, ended up with a very large sarcoma in his back leg. And if you ever saw Oliver, you would go, how on earth could this absolutely picture perfect beast of an animal? He was the most amazing looking cat you've ever seen, all black, shiny, rippling muscles with these glowing orange eyes. I mean, he was the picture of health, big and strong. He looked like a panther, and he starts limping one day, and I take him to the vet, and it ends up he's got this massive sarcoma in his back leg. The entire bone was Swiss cheese. And they were like, we don't know how that happens. They're telling me, well, it's just by chance sometimes, just like children that end up with leukemia. We don't know where it comes from. But my doctor had then started telling me that she had come from Cornell University, which is one of the leading veterinary universities in the country. And she was a part of the study where they had been studying the connection between aluminum adjuvants that they were using in the rabies, 3-year rabies vaccine, and the bone sarcomas. And veterinary medicine had even taken a step further. They were so sure that there was a connection that if you remember in the old days, back in the 70s when we were kids, that they literally used to take your animal, your dogs and your cats, by the scruff of the neck, and they would give them all the injections in the back of the neck. My doctor told me, she said, did you notice now we give the injections in the legs and we do some injections on the one leg, some injections on the other, because there was such a high incidence of sarcomas with that 3-year rabies vaccine. And if they were getting it in the back of the neck, well, if the animal ended up with cancer, it would be a little hard to cut it out now, wouldn't it, on the spine? So they decided to do it on the leg because if a sarcoma appeared, they could at least amputate. Well, my poor kitty cat, that's exactly what happened. I actually we did some scans of his heart and his lungs, and it hadn't metastasized. So I had his leg amputated. And oh my God, can I just tell you what a fucking horrible experience that was to even have to be the person to make that decision. But I mean, he was only like a year and a half old, and he was healthier than a horse. But what came out of that is when they amputated his leg, my doctor asked for permission to use his leg and to send it to Cornell to be a part of that study. And she was pretty certain that the 3-year rabies vaccine that he had gotten in that leg about 8 months before was exactly what caused that sarcoma. And I will tell you, there was even on record, I remember I took him back about a month after he had gotten that injection because there was a lump at the site of the injection. And the doctor said, well, sometimes it causes an immune response that takes a while. All the white blood cells gather around there and it starts to make that, and I don't remember what it's called. You know what I'm talking about, though, that clear stuff that then, turns it into a little, it's like the healing. I think it's dead white blood cells is what it is that makes that clear stuff in a large wound like that. And she said, just keep an eye on it, but it should go down. And, it did end up going down. But what happened is his whole freaking leg got infected with cancer. So, when I look at stuff like that, my cat back in the 80s, my friends, well, actually, my cat was probably back in the early 90s. My friends who then went to the Gulf in the early 90s and came home and have been messed up with different immune issues ever since. And now I look at this new generation of all these vaccines, and we looked at the Gardasil vaccine. I mean, 100%. I dug into the manufacturer's website and how exactly they made that vaccine and the technologies they were using in. They have this patented virus-like particle, and I've talked about that, the VLPs, and they load them full of nanotech and then inject them into your young fledgling 8 and 9-year-old child to prevent certain cancers in their future, or into your son to prevent penile and anal cancer. I mean, give me a fucking break. This is generation one testing on your children. And anybody, and I have been seeing so many anti-vaxxer things now, they are making anti-vaxxers into 100% criminals. You see this Disney World thing? I mean, I had always predicted that with this war on terror, there was going to be a big fucking explosion at Disney World and lots of dead children, because you know what? That's where FEMA told us that the terrorists were going to strike us, was killing our children. That's when America would wake up. Well, hey, where best to kill our children but Disney World? Every little girls and boys nirvana to go to Disney World. Well, no. You know what? They actually did a right turn. And this is no better. Oh, measles outbreak at Disney World. And now it's all over. And oh my God, it's those unfucking vaccinated children that now cause this measles outbreak. Did you catch that? And now there is this big blow up again about anti-vax parents and what a bunch of idiots they are. And oh my God, they don't understand the technology. And I'm going to tell you something. Any parent who believes these fucking multi-billion-dollar corporations. Did you guys hear April and Verstein's show the week before, Dr. Lucier? That was the confessions of a drug pusher woman, the one who wrote the book after working 25 years in the pharmaceutical companies. And you know what she said? She said that collateral damage is actually figured into the budget when they release a drug. And they used to have to warn doctors about the side effects, about the cautions, about the dangers, but now they don't. And you know why they don't? Because if your kid is the 1% or the 2% that ends up brain damaged or dying or drooling for the rest of their lives, that's the cost of doing business. There's a fund put aside to negotiate with you to pay you off to keep your mouth shut. How fucking disgusting is that? So as I see this now, and I mean, this isn't even next generation pharmaceuticals. This is last generation. So I'm going to tell you something. This next generation of pharmaceuticals should fucking make you want to bawl your eyes out, because this is the last nail of the coffin for biological life on this planet. This is synthetic biology being inserted into all of us. Synthetic biology that now has some intelligence tied to it that they can manipulate and control. I mean, nanotechnology has had that promise for a long time. And when you find out that, holy shit, hey, guess what? It's been in your food for at least the last 15 years. I'm going to say even more. I'm going to say mid-90s. I mean, 15 years at least that they admit. But I'm going to tell you, mid-90s is when they first started spewing about it in Scientific American and the promise of it and all this great shit. They've only been using it as a preservative and a flavor enhancer for the last 15 years or so. I mean, it's a pretty scary thought. JJ wants to hop on. I'm sure he has something to say. I got so much stuff, JJ, but you know what? If I don't get to it today, we'll get to it tomorrow. Here, let me bring you on. I'm going to tell you, if you did not catch April and Verstein's first 2 parts to the series of Big Pharma and SSRIs and injections and vaccines and the drugs that they're pushing on us, you have to. They have a playlist on the UCY YouTube page, or they have their own feed on their UCY web page. They're ucy.tv/TTR, which is Truth or Talk Radio, or youtube.com/UCY TV. And there's a playlist for Truth or Talk Radio, or you can just scroll down through the most recent uploads. You'll see them. They're on Sunday afternoon. So if you scroll down through the Sunday shows, you'll see them. But I would highly, highly recommend that you listen to those. I think also in between there, they also had, yes, they did, Eileen Danneman, who is part of the VAC Truth. I think she is. I get her newsletter every week, and she exposes so much garbage that they are doing to us. And I think there's one more that April and Verstein have in queue to continue with this poisoning of our planet and our children and all of us by all of these large corporate entities that really don't have you or me or our kids in their best interest. We are money-making schemes. All of this pollution, all of this genetic damage that's been done from our environment to us is now, quote unquote, being cured by pill pushers and injection pushers. And it's not being cured. You're a freaking Generation 1 guinea pig experiment. And they just actually, Pigmine uploaded a video some point this morning. They just found a gene. Oh my God. I mean, how wonderful is medicine? They cured Ebola. Look, there wasn't an outbreak in this country. Those new RNAi vaccines must be great. Let's all line up and get them for our kids. But now they just found a gene that they think will extend life by 60%. Oh, Eric Schmidt must be creaming in his jeans for his longevity project. I just, oh my God, does this make me angry? All right, let's see if we can get JJ here. I have to remember what his Skype name was. Hopefully he'll connect. Ding-a-ling-a-ling for a Monday. And yes, if you could tell, I actually got up a little bit early today. I did not roll out of bed 5 minutes before airtime. JJ!
Hey, can you hear me?
I can. Good morning. How are you?
Do I sound like I'm on an intercom in an apartment building?
No, not really.
Well, good. Yeah, and listen, I did catch actually part of April's show yesterday. And you know, I agree with what she has to say. I've got a friend whose son has autism, Cosmo. Everybody knows Cos.
Yes.
And, you know, he was a normal kid until he went and got that last set of shots. And, you know, these new generation of, like you were mentioning, all this crap is the new generation of medicine, whether it's pain medication, anti-inflammatory, are all the same thing. They all have. You have to look at the side effects. The side effects are suicide, suicidal thoughts. All these fucking drugs, pardon my language, are the SSRI derivatives. Even the pain drugs now.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you look at the new drug out there for arthritis, for rheumatoid arthritis, and fibromyalgia. The name eludes me.
Yeah, my mother takes, well, I don't know if she's still taking it, but that Aleve, that's for fibromyalgia. And that's a
Yeah, no,
COX,
not
that's,
Aleve.
well, that
Aleve.
Aleve, I'm going to tell you, is a COX-2 inhibitor that causes freaking strokes. Now, I'll
Yeah.
tell you what you can use as a natural COX-2 inhibitor is curcumin.
Curcumin. You can use capsaicin, which is
Yes.
red pepper. There are a lot of things. Hell, birch bark. Um, the that new drug that, and I hope your mom's not on it. They cause depression.
Well, I'll tell you what, all of them will cause depression, and then they can treat them with antidepressives that then make you want to kill people. Did you hear Dr. Lucerius yesterday saying that they either want to be suicidal or they want to turn it and they kill others, depending on, if they turn it
Exactly.
toward themselves or they turn it toward others. And that's
Well,
that.
and that's what one of the mothers at Columbine at a press conference had to say. She said, "We got all these kids on these pills, and they're just—it's like a giant thing of popcorn. Just as the heat turns up, every once in a while, a kernel pops, kapop, 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 and half of our nation is on. And they're all the same. They all cause depression. They all cause suicidal thoughts, homicidal thoughts. Now, some people, I mean, and that includes things like Wellbutrin and Chantix, and now all of the new pain drugs. To get everybody off these bad, you can't have people taking Loratab or Vicodin, drugs that actually work. That yes, do have the side effect of can be habit forming. Most of the look, you got to look at it like this: 95% of the time they aren't habit forming because 95% of the population takes them and doesn't end up with a pain pill habit. But now, when you start taking all these other drugs on top of, so suppose you're taking Adderall, you're on Chantix, now you're on this. I wish I could think of the name of this new arthritis drug. So now you've got all these different chemicals that change the way you think and the way you feel.
Well, the thing is, too, JJ, is they're giving you all these. And one of the things that was admitted by the drug pusher lady is that they really don't know how these are going to react or what they really do to the brain and to the body. It's just a side effect. So they give you the drug, and the side effect happens to be you have a little bit less pain. Oh, let's give it to them. And a lot of these drugs, and both the drug pusher lady and Dr. Lucier had talked about using off-label drugs, that
Yeah,
they're doing that a lot. There
they
are
just
drugs that
relabel
are for something else, right? Like Wellbutrin
Wellbutrin, yeah,
used to be for depression, and they're like, oh, look, it also helps people stop smoking.
and weight loss. Oh, so
Right.
you need to lose weight? Here, we got
Here,
the same thing.
Wellbutrin, right. And I mean, there's a lot of damage that's being done. People are dying, and that's just considered collateral damage. They don't give two shits
No,
about it.
no, they want you to be in that psychosis, which you go into. I mean, I took Chantix for a little while, and
Me too.
you can't. I mean, I'm sorry, but I'd rather smoke than kill my wife.
Yeah, that's true.
I was in prison with a guy who killed his wife on Prozac, and I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for her and her family, but it's also heartbreaking for this guy who actually sued Prozac, the makers of Prozac, and lost. Um, and I actually had a friend or a person on my show a couple of years ago, uh, Mark Taylor, his mother Donna. They sued the makers of Luvox, I believe it was, back after Columbine, and they're the ones that actually made it. You couldn't win. You can't win a case against them. The only winning, the only thing you could consider a win was they had to put after that the warning label that these drugs cause,
Right,
you
that
know,
black label or whatever it is that they
yeah.
have to put on it. Yeah.
But
I
that's
think
it, and you hit it on the nail on the head. Um, they've created a fund for the small percentage of people who are everybody's affected, but there's a small percentage of people who can't handle it, who turn autistic or who have Guillain-Barré or who have this list of ailments that can happen to you. When the other 95% actually they can take it, but they're not the same. You
you know
become a lifelong, you know, uh, client, a lifelong consumer of pharmaceutical drugs, and they're all made from the same thing. They're all like fluoride derivatives of these SSRIs, relabeled, remanufactured.
but remember that was up until now. All of these next generation drugs are really frightening.
Yeah,
They're beyond. I mean, we're talking biotech, nanotech, RNAi type stuff
yeah,
that
they want to put vaccines in our milk.
they want to put it in everything, guys. And they're already doing that in Africa. Of course, Africa, where they try everything. Bill Gates, and I'm telling you guys, they changed their whole website. So none of their current projects are up there now. But at one point, you used to be able to go to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation website and you could scroll all the way back through all of the different things that were funded by them for research. And typically it was for malaria and polio and, all the things that Gates proposes he needs to eradicate in the world. But they had this whole thing going on for the malaria goats
Yeah,
where they were just like the spider goats,
and the
right?
mosquitoes.
Yeah, and the genetically modified mosquitoes that remember he released them at that
I
TED
don't know how.
conference, and they
Yeah,
weren't real. He laughed about it, but people got really pissed about that. But they
I
have
was starting
since
to
released
see.
them. They released them in Australia, and they released them. I'm telling you, those ones that showed up, and we played that clip so many times with the bug lady talking about how these new mosquitoes that mysteriously appeared eat the indigenous mosquitoes and mosquito eggs. They don't carry malaria, which how they mysteriously knew that. They're like the size of pterodactyls, and they stab fish, dogs, and people. They get people through their clothes. They were like super mosquitoes,
Yeah,
and
I
they
do
just
remember that.
happened to blow up from a hurricane that came from the Bahamas.
Yeah, no,
I
I
mean, come
remember that.
on. And, a year before that, they had actually talked about wanting to release genetically modified mosquitoes in the Keys. And everyone stood up and said, no fucking way. We don't want genetically modified mosquitoes. So a year later, these
They
mysterious
found them
new
in Florida.
pterodactyl mosquitoes just blow up in a hurricane.
Yeah, in Florida.
In Florida.
That was
Yeah.
last year. Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Well,
I
and
mean,
then you
how
have
stupid are people? People who don't pay attention wouldn't have known that. They're like, oh my God, global warming is making these mutant mosquitoes. I don't think so. It's people like evil masterminds like Bill Gates that are making the genetically modified
yeah.
mosquitoes and giving little baby goats to African villagers loaded with freaking malaria
And
vaccine.
what about all these new diseases that are out there? Oh my goodness. Go to Plum Island. That's where they're coming from.
Yeah. Well, Plum Island is being,
They're
and
talking about moving Plum Island to
no,
upstate New York.
no,
Hot
they moved
land.
it to Kansas.
Uh,
JJ, they moved it right to the heartland, to Kansas.
well, they're talking about another facility here. Yeah, yeah. It's not. It used to be at least you'd have water separate.
Right, it was surrounded, but they moved it to Kansas.
Yeah,
Now, I
no,
don't
you're
think
right.
it's full blown open yet because they were still working on construction. But, we had been calling that out in the very beginning, like, how dumb is that? And then a year and a half later, I see a story coming out from a mainstream pub
About
like
the unlocked
New
door.
York Times or Forbes going, right in the middle of Tornado Alley. That probably isn't the best place to put this, bio lab with the most virulent
I know.
viruses on
And
the
then last.
planet in it. And then we had that story that came out about that new tick disease, never before seen,
Mhm.
that farmer just died from in fucking Kansas.
Yeah, I'm not. I haven't delved too deeply into it, but Lyme disease is another one of those diseases that is manufactured. That they,
Absolutely. And I think that came from Plum Island. And
Yeah,
they found it in ticks and mosquitoes. I researched that a lot. It has this speegoat that hides, and it's like a little corkscrew, and it gets into your joints. And if you don't treat that right away, they said it's very cunning because it can hide for 20 years.
yeah.
You got to catch it right away. And there's
I know somebody.
cephalosporins, I believe, are what treat it, but you got to get it right away.
Yeah, I know somebody in Syracuse a few years ago died from Lyme disease. Not he wasn't really a close friend of mine or anything, but it was somebody I knew, and I'd never heard of a person who died from Lyme
Well, it's
disease.
very debilitating.
Well, and then you remember last year, or might even been the year before, the story of the back doors at this. It might have been a facility in Tennessee that was like Plum Island. It was where they researched and created these horrible diseases, and they found people going in and out the back, an unlocked back door. Not
What,
that
the
were
CDC?
That might have been
I mean, you
CDC.
remember the CDC, they had freaking smallpox just sitting for 20 years on top of a filing cabinet. They're like, oops. And there were multiples. They had been transporting stuff like smallpox in Ziploc baggies.
I know.
I mean, come on. And that was right before the quote unquote Ebola outbreak. I mean, I think that it is all a psyop. This was all lining up to now precision medicine, using your genetics, giving up your genetics, getting rid of HIPAA because it's not for the good of the people. Why would you keep your health information private? You could release it to the world in the electronic medical health records. So now we can use your data as a grand data source for the pharmaceutical companies, for the venture capitalists to all get their R&D budget to zero. Remember,
Yeah.
I've been saying that. Now they don't have to pay for R&D on monkeys because you're the monkey. You're
Yeah.
in the
You're not.
database. They're going to sell those companies a monthly subscription to your health data for
Well, plus they
$39.95 a
use that.
user.
The insurance companies get all that information. So now that it's a mandate that you buy a product, which is completely, absolutely, and utterly opposite of what we would consider as constitutional, you're being forced to buy insurance.
Obamacare.
Well, they take all
Obamacare.
that information. They know that you're eating Doritos and fucking ho hos,
Well, and you know
or that
what?
you smoke, or that you drink.
Don't you think that this Obamacare thing was all about giving Americans health care? We've already discovered that as it's bankrupted
Bill and
people and
Hillary
dumped
Clinton
them.
tried to pass that.
They sure did. And you know what it does? It gives all those pharmaceutical companies a big butt slap as a high five. And we also discovered that when they passed this, Congress came out and they had to decide whether or not Obamacare was to be considered a health care plan. And if it was considered a health care plan, it then would be protected against fraud and bribes under the same laws that they had passed to cover Medicare and Medicaid. Well, guess what? Congress decided not to make Obamacare a quote unquote technical health care plan. You know what that means? That means that bribes, backdoor money, insider trading is all fucking legal.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big orgy free for all for every single one of them. So Obama standing up and saying precision healthcare is the way of the future, and we should be puking. This is the cherry on top of them all getting fucking rich. Richer.
Yeah.
Using
Well,
you.
are you going to be able to stop it? So you do have some choices, and the only choice you really have is to realize that this stuff is going on and realize there is medicine out there and you can make it yourself.
Well, and remember, a lot of these corporations, these pharmaceutical companies,
They're
are now
trying to get
doing
it now.
things like going to China and genetically sequencing all of these Eastern herbs to turn them into, and their exact quote was, medicine that we could bring to the Western world. So
Yeah.
again, turning them into something they can patent, genetically modify, and then give to you.
Yep.
It's disgusting. It's very disgusting.
Well, then they can give it to you or not.
Right. Well, and that's, that was the one story I wanted to get to Friday about this precision medicine is they said, this precision medicine is great, but paying for it is going to be another thing. And like, the way Obama announced this, I'm sure that half of America was going, "Oh my God, he's just such a wonderful president. Look at, he wants us all to live to be 100. And look at what a humanitarian this man is." Well, if you realize that it's going to cost anywhere from 300,000 to $1 million a year for you to get your precision medicine treatment, number one, and then who's going to pay for it? The insurance company? Probably not. Oh, what is Obama going to do it under Obamacare? Well, maybe. So
Well,
taxpayers?
what happens when your baby's born? They say, look, your child has this gene or this gene or this gene, and we can give them an injection now, blah blah blah, and you refuse. Now CPS can come and take your kid.
Well, what's going to happen when they do the genetic testing when you're pregnant and they say, look, your kid doesn't have this, 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 and this gene for brain intelligence. So maybe you want to think about aborting. Or how about when your kid, I
Yeah,
mean, look
that's
at in
Bill Gates.
Belgium. Well, that is Bill Gates. And look at in Belgium. Back last year, they had that whole debate about whether or not you can euthanize perpetually sick children, children with autism, children that maybe aren't going to live beyond 20 years old. And they actually decided that it was ethically possible to euthanize your child.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
then
don't think that
sterilize
that isn't setting precedent
and
somewhere.
then sterilize the parent.
Yeah. Well, or sterilize them without their knowledge through the GMOs and everything else, the birth control, the vaccinations of some kind or another, the Gardasil that they're giving the teenage girls.
Yeah, and they found spermicide in most of these vaccines.
Well, not
What the
just
hell does a
that.
vaccine? What the hell does a vaccine need spermicide for?
I don't know.
So
I don't know. I don't know. Would spermicide actually work in a vaccination though?
it's in the they found it in the flu shots.
Yeah, the flu shots that don't work, but they made everyone line up for it. And guess what? You were probably just a guinea pig for some new, testing as to whether or not you're going to get Guillain-Barré as you
Yeah,
start having Tourette's and the shakes. Don't even get me started because we need to also get back on that mad cow Alzheimer's connection that I found that I knew forever. I knew it, but I found an actual scientific study now that is looking at this going, we think these might be the same disease potentially. But you knew when they first found Mad Cow that Georgie Bush was in office and all of his friends were cattle ranchers. So they quieted that down very quickly. We heard then that half of our meat is cancerous, and what they're doing is cutting off the heads of healthy cows and submitting those for testing as they're sending the carcass of the cancerous cow for processing. Well, you better believe they're probably doing that same thing with the mad cow cows. They also cull them before they're downers. That's all. Before the issue was culling them after they fell with their, they end up getting the shakes and they can't stand and they're having, the whatever it's called, where they can't stand anymore
yeah.
from nerve damage. All that stuff is in our food supply. And I was just seeing, oh, what was it? China or Japan was just forcing our feet to the fire over something. It might have been China. Oh, no, it was Japan. And it was for some of their radioactive fucking food. They're trying to push us now. Their rice that they declared that all of a sudden it's radiation free. They're telling us now that we should be buying it again because they bought our beef after we declared it was safe, after they had banned it from mad
Very few
cow.
countries buy export or import American meat.
Right, because it's
Most countries
loaded.
have banned American meat,
It's loaded with toxins. That's why. It's
and
loaded with
now,
toxins.
again, we can skip and go right over to another one of your one of the things that you turned me on to was the glyphosate toxicity. That comes from these Roundup Ready crops and the herbicides,
Yeah.
which by according to a researcher at IMT, MIT, and this was somebody's been posting this article for the last couple of days. By 2025, they feel like half the children born in America will be autistic.
They absolutely did just talk about that. And yeah, it was MIT. Gringo brought up a good point in chat. What about the Amish? And yeah, I saw a study about that. The Amish don't have autism.
No, they don't.
And they don't get the vaccines and they don't eat the GMO food.
And
They
they
do
don't get
everything from
colorectal
scratch.
cancer, and they don't have fucking, thyroid cancer, and they don't have half of the diseases we have.
Nope. So let that be a lesson for anyone who's out there who, takes the guilt complex that their pediatrician gives them. And I'm telling you, there is a battle brewing because this next round of vaccines is going to include the Gardasil. And there's going to be a big war on. Things are going to probably have to change here
And,
after
my
that.
doctor says, Jim, you have to give your daughter the Gardasil. I'm like, no. He says, but Jim, it prevents cancer. I said, but doctor, it doesn't. It actually, if you take this Gardasil shot, you become 40 to 50% more likely to develop these polyps, which incidentally is how my mother died. My stepmother. She had polyps. They were precancerous polyps. They told her she could, or if they were uncomfortable, she could have them removed, but otherwise, it was no problem. Well, she died from cancer in her cervix, or not. It wasn't HPV type cancer. It was cervical cancer. Didn't come from.
Well, they say that HPV can cause cervical cancer.
It may.
But like I said, here's the thing about
rare
cervical cancer, and I have first-handed experience from family members in this. You go for a pap smear every year, okay? That's what they look for, are abnormal cells in the cervix. If there was going to be a vaccine, it should be for something like ovarian cancer that has no signs, no symptoms, and no tests until it's already in stage 4. Once you discover you have ovarian cancer, it's a death sentence.
Pap smears are almost 100% in detecting early detection, and they have no side effects.
Right.
So why wouldn't you just get a regular pap smear?
Well, and you should be going anyway yearly for your exam. They're not giving you vaccines. You're just going for your yearly exam.
A mammogram causes breast cancer.
Well, yeah, and the mammogram, that whole thing, I bought into that in the beginning, and I ended that quickly as I started to research. Absolutely
not. Pap smears are almost 100% effective in
it's just a cell culture. That's all it is.
Exactly.
Well, guess what? We're down to the last 30 seconds, if you can believe it. That was fast. I can't believe how fast it went. Yeah, thanks for coming on, JJ. We haven't had you on in a long time. Anytime you feel like it. Well, hey, guys, make sure you stick around because it is Monday night. I got a brand new Truth on the Tracks for tonight. Brandon's going to rip some new asshole. I love his shows. He's going to talk about a lot of different stuff. Make sure you stick around, though. Anti-Media with Nick and DB are on tonight, too. I got to tell you guys, tomorrow we have to give a high five to Nick. Nick did UCY a big solid. All right, guys, everyone have a happy Monday, and we will catch up with you tomorrow. Take care.